Good afternoon, guys, and welcome into episode 8 of Hawgs on the Hill, live from the home field studio. We're your go-to podcast for an in-depth dive into all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Join us as we dissect all the victories, analyze all the plays, and revel in the spirit of the Hawgs. As always, episode 8 is brought to you by Home Field. You can step into the legacy of collegiate style with Home Field's premium vintage apparel. Embrace the spirit of your alma mater or your favorite college team with their meticulously crafted, comfortable, and stylish collection. Elevate your game day attire and celebrate the rich history of college sports. Home Field, where tradition meets modern comfort with every stitch. You can use variety sports and all caps to receive 15% off your order from Home Field. And go check them out. They got a lot of fantastic Arkansas gear. And we got some updates as far as recruiting and transfer portal news for you guys. And then towards the end here, we will jump into our quarterbacks preview, as this is our first week to start doing our position group breakdowns week by week. And those are going to happen week in and week out. And then we're going to go by position. And, I put a poll out early in the week and you guys wanted to see quarterbacks first. We got a lot of, let's talk about receivers and tight ends. Offensive line, also linebacker. So we'll hit all those in the coming weeks as we build up to the season. It's going to be exciting. And we'll just jump in here with some updates as far as commits. For Razorback football, you had a big commitment last week with four-star linebacker Tavian Wallace committing to Arkansas. That's a big get for these Hogs, as he was a Georgia kid. So getting him from Georgia, there's a video that went out on social media of Travis Williams super excited running around the football center, after we found out we got that commit. So, that's going to be a big piece for Arkansas coming in next season.
Yeah, and nowadays and age, one of the biggest pieces is keeping that commitment. So doing all the right things to make sure that we don't lose that commitment. And there's a lot of facets that go into that, whether it's financials, winning games, potential to play. I mean, there's a lot of different things there. And then just relationships with the coaches. So you can tell that there's already some good relationships being built there. But I thought that was a big time pickup, somebody that's very highly rated, could have gone to plenty of other schools. So that was a big time pickup and definitely a huge statement piece, in my opinion, for Travis Williams.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's big, just after I think the loss of not Bumper Pool, but Chris Paul Jr. last year transferring out, I see Wallace, he could come in and be one of those guys like Chris Paul and be a young leader for this defense, coming in and being super talented, and maybe have that leadership mentality, depending on, I don't know what next year is going to look like. Like you said, it's all about keeping that commitment, and who knows who stays, who transfers, who we bring in next year. But, with his talent and coming in, I think, he could have the chance to be a key piece on that defense for, a few years to come.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We've got a couple of guys that transferred in that have potential to really step up for us this year and help out that linebacking unit. But as we talked in previous shows, that is kind of one of our question mark positions, if you will, that could see some good things this year, could see some struggles. And so I think building some depth for years to come, keeping guys of this caliber coming in as freshmen, as transfers, things of that nature is how you get that depth. So, keep on keeping on, if you will, in both facets of it, whether it's transfers and freshmen, to try to bring in talent of that level.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. Unfortunately, we didn't get to have you at the live show last time, but I want to get your opinion. David and I talked a little bit about it. How do you feel about getting another one of those fantastic wide receivers out of Warren, Arkansas? Seems like a wide receiver capital for Arkansas, and, with several of the greats that have came from there. Another one of these guys that he's only a 3-star, but, I think he could maybe not be rated as high as he should. Another pipeline to Warren and getting one of those top receivers in the state.
Yeah, so everybody knows Petrino loves his Warren wide receivers. There's always been good history there with wide receivers coming out of Warren that play under Petrino. So it just seems like, that this story has potential written all over it. So we'll kind of see where the cards fall once he's on campus and is able to develop. But that is one of the things that Petrino was always good at, was taking 3- and 4-star kids and getting them to play like 5-star kids. Through different types of scheming, improvements, developments, all those types of things that go into it. So that is one thing that I do think Petrino has an edge against some other offensive coordinators out there, is the way he is able to develop players. Might be a touch above what we've seen in recent years. Obviously, under Enos, that was pretty abysmal. And then there was sparks under Bryles where you saw players, really step up and shine after a year or two, but nothing like some of the major sophomore leaps, if you will, that we saw back when Petrino was head coach, with some of the receivers and running backs that he was able to bring through, and then obviously quarterbacks. So I've got high hopes. And like you said, it's a pipeline for us in a way, and I'm curious to see if we can kind of keep the success rolling from Warren, Arkansas.
So Drew, couldn't say it better. You love to see those Homestead kids, especially like the history behind that too, with the last one being Traylon Burks. So, I think it's due time to get another one.
Yeah, real quick, big thing on it. If he's able to come in, have a couple really fantastic years for us, like a Traylon Burks, it might help you not lose some of the in-state guys that we have lost recently due to the past year and a half of struggles, if you will. So, kind of flipping the script maybe on a couple of these in-state guys, getting them to come in, having massive success, turning them into, household names like a Traylon Burks, for example. That's how you start keeping more and more of those in-state players. And I think we've got to get back to that for sure.
That's true. I think this year could be that pivotal year that you're looking at. If we could have a decent season and, get the attention of some of these in-state recruits, NIL is going to be a factor. That's just today's day and age. But they also want to go to a program. Yeah, we could pay you a lot of money, but if they're not going to go to a program where they're going to have success and win as a team as well, that's another key part. So hopefully if we can have a, bounce back season this year, after last year, it was just, I don't blame maybe necessarily some of these kids for deciding to go elsewhere. I'd love for them to stay and be a Hog, but, honestly, after looking at last season, I wouldn't blame them. So, hopefully maybe we can have a turnaround season. Petrino can, get the offense back working. Pitman gets that offensive line back in order, and then you have, Travis Williams continue to improve that defense. Who knows what the season could look like, and that could help recruiting for, next season.
100%. Could be a great year, could be a terrible year. It's kind of one of those situations where we're in a not necessarily limbo, but in a very flexible situation where there's a lot of potential for both sides.
Yeah. There's a lot of unknowns, and, we'll talk about that with our, previews, but I think that's going to be a lot of it to see how some of these things turn out. And, we'll jump over to Arkansas basketball as far as their roster. So, originally Cal said about 9 to 10 guys, and now we have 12 men on this roster. He kind of finished up, if you will, with the last, commitment just yesterday, as we got Casimir Chavis, a 3-star shooting point guard out of Minneapolis. He was committed to Washington, decommitted after they fired their coach, and he decided to come to Arkansas. He talked about his decision. He said he wanted to go somewhere that would give him the best opportunity to develop, and he thought one of those best opportunities was here at Arkansas. And I don't blame him, for not only being Coach Cal, but also the staff that Cal has put together as well is going to be fantastic as far as developing players. And he could be one of those guys where, you're going to have your one and dones. You're going to have those transfers come in, but this could be a guy I could see that maybe is around for 2 to 3 years, kind of develops and becomes a key piece, kind of veteran guard for this team.
Yeah, a Devo Davis type of player, if you will, sticks around for a while, gives you a lot of good minutes. Unfortunately, Devo's not with the team, but he gave us a lot of good years, and those are the types of players that you can get, kind of few and far between, it seems like lately. So somebody of that caliber that does stick around for quite some time has an opportunity to really develop under this staff and with our facilities that we provide. I think you might see maybe a trend back to that a little bit more with certain players compared to the one and dones. You're going to have those guys that are kind of that upper echelon, but then a good team has several players that aren't one and done type caliber. I don't really know if that's the right terminology to use, but you have to have those type of players as well to be successful. You've seen it in all of the best teams that make it the furthest in the NCAA tournaments. They have a healthy mix of one and done type level players, and then they've got a healthy mix of players that have been there for a couple of years and transfers that have significant collegiate experience. So you got to find that balance.
Yeah, that's true. And then another guy that is on the team that is probably going to be one of those walk-on type roles that, he only saw the game action in 5 games last year is Kareem Watkins. He's a 5'8" point guard, and he is actually half brothers with DJ Wagner. So got some family connection there, but he appeared in 5 games for Kentucky last year, starting on senior night. So, he's a guy that is going to be one of those, if you will, depth bench pieces that is probably going to be your quote unquote like practice squad type guy that's going to go up against, your starters and work to simulate your opponent's offense and whatnot. So, now we know who's on this roster with Cal. Unfortunately, as far as another walk-on, Lawson Blake had that injury. You hate to see that. That's going to take him out at least half of his senior season. We hope he has a speedy recovery and can make it back in, hopefully for that later half of the season and get some minutes in some games, as this will be his last season. But, this roster's filled out. They've started practicing. There's been some clips released by the basketball social media team. And there's a lot of excitement and buzz flying around with, just those little clips that are going out there. And I think rightfully so. There's a lot of exciting plays and optimism around this program. It's almost re-energized with a new coach, lots of new faces, and I'm excited to see what this program is going to do. The closer we get, the continuity they have, and what this team looks like whenever we get to basketball season, and who knows, maybe we can schedule an early season kind of exhibition game type thing. That way we can get to see them as early as possible.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how early they start to develop consistent chemistry and look like a true unit out there on the floor. I know that's one of the things that Coach Cal harps on the biggest is guys playing well together and understanding each other's tendencies. You've already seen some clips of him getting after it in practice, if you will. So I think he has very, very high expectations of this team and has high expectations of what these players are able to do with each other. That's kind of been my take on some of the snippet videos we've seen so far, Coach Cal. But man, like you said, the hype is definitely building. I hate to have too high of expectations considering it's year one and there's so many fresh faces that who knows how they're going to play together and the effort level that we're going to get from all of them and all that. But I have a hard time thinking that it's going to be a bad year. So
yeah,
my gut says we're going to have a fun year, maybe lose some games we shouldn't, and maybe win some games we shouldn't. So hopefully we can have enough success to really build and keep things rolling into years 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think that could be the possibility. It'll be interesting to see, like you said, with this being an entirely new team, what that continuity looks like and, how these guys do gel together. And so we'll jump over Arkansas Gymnastics. Arkansas picked up a commitment out of the transfer portal for gymnastics with Maddie Walgora. She spent the last 5 seasons competing for Alabama. She was a staple on their bars, beam, and floor rotation in 2024. She scored a 9.850 or higher 7 times on bars and beam and 9 times on her floor routine. Talk about getting a key piece out of the transfer portal, experienced piece that's been around the SEC. I think Coach Weber's, got things rolling here.
Yeah, 100%. That's some serious experience. Probably a COVID year, I think, probably helping us out in this one. So that is cool to see, but it's a good thing. I think filling some areas where we had some issues last year, mainly on like beam, but that is some seriously high scores to add to a Razorbacks gymnastics team that was already on the up and up. So sky's the limit, man. I think we got a really, really good shot at being even more competitive than we were last year. And I thought we had a fantastic season last year.
Yeah, that we did. And what else is also going to have that is that we have a freshman that's coming in, will be a Razorback this year, but is also going to be considered an Olympian by the time season gets here, as Jocelyn Robertson from Texarkana, Texas qualified as a traveling alternate for the women's gymnastics team this year. She will be headed to the Paris Olympics in case of any injury to the 5 that qualified and got named as the team. She is the first ever gymnast to represent Arkansas as a member of Team USA. We've got Coach Weber that was an Olympian herself, but there's never been an Arkansas gymnast that has been a representative for Team USA at the Olympics. That's amazing. I watched the trials where she, qualified for this, and it was really close. This team has got a great like variety of experience. You've got Simone Biles, who was the overall top qualifier, and they said she's considered the oldest that the U.S. has ever sent at 27. And then you've got the youngest member of the team being 16 years old that qualified, which is insane.
Wow. Yep.
So and then they talked about how this gymnastics team is composed of several former Olympians and medalists. And they said this is the first time a country's been able to send a team like that's that experienced and had, already former Olympians and medalists on that team. So, this has the chance to be a fun Olympics. I don't want to see any injuries, but it'd be cool if somehow, Jocelyn got the opportunity to compete at the Olympics. Getting to go and qualifying for that's still fantastic. But it'd be awesome to get to see her, perform and get out there and show what she can do and how talented she is.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of those stories that she'll be able to remember forever, whether she gets to compete or not. Being able to go over to Paris to those Olympics, whether she's able to make it to another Olympics 4 years from now, we'll see on that one. Got a lot of potential to do that with how young she is, but nonetheless, you're getting awesome stories and awesome experiences to bring back home and to kind of revel in whenever you do start your college career and share with your future teammates.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's going to be really cool. Like you said, if she can qualify now, hopefully by the time the next Olympics rolls around, she'll be able to jump up there and maybe qualify again and hopefully land one of those spots where, she's an actual one of the competitors instead of just an alternate.
Yep.
And so, that's fantastic news for Arkansas gymnastics. We'll jump down here to Arkansas baseball. You've got the draft this coming weekend. We already know Hagen's going to go top 10. It's just where in that top 10 is he going to go? I'm hearing a lot of 7 that he's getting looks from the Cardinals, the Angels. It'll be interesting to see. I think Seth and I both could say we'd love to see him stay closer to home with St. Louis, but, going anywhere in that top 10 spot is going to be fantastic for him after the season he had. But, Arkansas got some great news yesterday as a big name, not big name, but big name for Arkansas announced his return for another year to play at Arkansas. Will Big Mac McIntyre is coming back for his 6th season as a Razorback. He said he wasn't done yet. You got to love to see that kid. He put his, all out on the field. I watched that last interview after the super regional and he just, you could tell he was upset. He didn't like the way it ended. Nobody did. But, he's a home state kid, really grew up for Arkansas. And I think this could be big for Arkansas. It gives them an experienced piece next year. Yes, he struggled towards the end of the season. Maybe he can go into this offseason, work on some developing, maybe another pitch or two, or refine another pitch or two. That way he's not super heavy reliable on that kind of cutter type pitch that he relied on this year, that kind of everybody knew that's what he was going to throw. And really towards the end of the season, he got hit on a lot. So, maybe he can come in and develop something this offseason and be able to have a great 6 years as a Razorback.
Yeah, I think that needs to be the strategy for sure. And I know everybody in the coaching staff probably is aware of that too. His cutter's phenomenal, but when you're throwing at 83% of your pitches, people are going to start dropping the bat head and teeing off on some of those. So being able to mix in a few more fastballs, a couple of different changeups and things like that, maybe will help him out. So give him an off season to, like you said, he's got some of those pitches, just refine a few things, maybe work on his balance a little bit more on what his approach is to different hitters and stuff. So the dude is a workhorse. You know, he's going to be out there giving his all, giving his maximum effort in every practice, every rep, every single workout. So I'm excited to see, you know, what he's able to bring. And even if he doesn't, you know, pitch a tremendous amount, if he's not starting or something crazy, the amount of leadership that he brings to our team, that's something that you can't take for granted. He's definitely a level-headed guy that can keep some of the other players around him potentially a little bit level-headed if times get kind of rough. Baseball is a mental game for sure, and having tough guys around you that are mentally strong, you can kind of glean off of those guys as a player. And so having him in that locker room, whether he's pitching that day or not, is going to be a benefit to us. So I'm glad to see him come back. You know, it's kind of weird seeing some of these guys that's been around the program as long as they have, but it's cool to see that it's a change compared to what we're used to. You know what I'm saying? So definitely a cool thing. And I think in my mind, you know, if Will understands that, okay, maybe I'm not going to have a career in the pros, the longer I'm here at Arkansas, the more relationships I make with these coaches and stuff, the more opportunities I'm going to have to maybe turn into a coach myself one day. I think he's got that level of mental capacity, that level of leadership ability, the aptitude, all of those things. So I think that could definitely be something in the cards for Will after this season. But I'm curious to see, you know, like you said, what he's able to develop and bring to the table, you know, to kind of add one more extra level to his game. He was a great pitcher for us last year. Like you said, had a couple struggles towards the end of the year, but overall had a good season. And I think we're going to be banking on him to kind of repeat that next year.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, Vols Fanatics, our fellow college huddle, SEC college huddle, says, you know, hey guys, you know, thanks for tuning in and watching. But obviously, like he said, Arkansas had a fantastic pitching last year in defense. But how's our offseason moves this season been for the offensive side of the ball for baseball? That's a great question. You know, we've talked about several of these guys that you've seen Dave go out and get, you know, clearly a lot of outfielders and speed. And, you know, yes, we're having to replace our entire outfield for the most part. You know, the only question mark there is, does Kendall Diggs return? Other than that, you're losing your entire outfield. You know, you had a couple guys grad transfers that came in. You're losing some to the transfer portal, some to just eligibility. But yeah, he's went out and got guys that, like Seth said, has some speed, but also, you know, can put balls in play and have more of those like doubles or, you know, singles and not just pure home run power. Because like Dave said at the end of the season in his off-season in the season press conference there, you know, you can't just have 8 guys that go up there to hit home runs. You've got to have guys that put ball in play. And, you know, even though they didn't win it all, but they made a deep run. Look at Kentucky. You know, they played that small ball type of play where, you know, they had guys that could put it in play, but they also had guys that could also step up there and rip it and hit a home run. So I think that's what Dave has went out there and really established with several of these, you know, commitments that he's went out there got. They're, you know, guys that can hit and run. And, you know, one of the guys you look at, Logan Maxwell from TCU, 10 of 12 for stolen bases. I don't even know if we attempted to steal 12 bases the entire season. So to see that he's going out and addressing that is big. You know, another guy that we're going to talk about here in just a minute, 25 stolen bases. Yes, it's JUCO guy, but, you know, that still shows that he's fast and has that ability. And, you know, I think that the head on him to understand when not to and when to steal, I think that'll be big. And I think Dave's really addressed that. And I've liked what he's done in the portal so far.
Yeah, 100%. Got a couple of guys come in for outfield positions that hit well over 300 last year, batting average, had plenty of stolen bases, RBI, things of that nature, but weren't heavily reliant on home runs. They were hitting, you know, 320, 330. A couple of these guys only had 3 or 4 home runs on the year, which you want home runs, but then at the same time, you want guys that can kind of fill those leadoff spots, get on base, find ways to move other runners around without having to have sack flies and sack bunts every single time kind of scenarios. So, yeah, to your point, I think he's addressing some of the issues we had last year that definitely hurt us to where we would get somebody on base, but just physically couldn't move them around. At one point, we were leading the SEC in runners left on base. So you got to correct that and find ways to get those guys moved around a little bit more consistently than we did.
Yeah, that's true. And so Will McIntyre returning, fantastic news. We love to see that. As far as transfer portal guys, Dave has continued to address that. He went and got an infielder from Rhode Island, Michael Anderson. He's a first baseman. We know we're having to replace Benny Barrels, Ben McLaughlin, as he's out of eligibility. He hit .252 last season with 13 home runs, 9 doubles, 46 RBIs, and had an OPS of .985.
It's pretty solid.
So he's going out there addressing some of those infield needs that we're going to need as well. I think he's looking to bring in guys that are excited and open to having some competition. As we've got a lot of young guys on this roster. One of the guys that I think could be competitive for first base is a guy named Reese Robinette that we didn't see much of him this year, but he had some big clutch hits to end of the season 2 years ago. And we'll talk about it in a minute, but he's had a great season in the Cape Cod League down in Florida, as he's sitting at the top of the boards for batting and whatnot down there and putting up a lot of offense.
Yeah, you could tell that he's got a big bat and he's a big body fella. That's what you want on first base. So he played that red shirt role this year, just saving some eligibility. So we obviously had who we wanted at first base all year long. I thought Ben McLaughlin had a phenomenal year. Maybe even an underrated year, but now you've got to fill that hole. And so you've got a pretty good level of competition coming in between a couple guys returning and then a couple transfers you're bringing in. And that's what you need. You have to have that competition level to bring out the best in some of these guys. And I think you've got a few players that will really rise to the occasion and you'll get their best ball.
Yeah, agree. And then, Dave's going out and addressing some of the pitching stuff too, because, you're losing at least, Hagen Smith. Who knows about Brady Taggart or Mason Molina? We'll see what happens in the draft and where they go and if they're kind of offered what they're looking for. But, we talked about it at the live show. He went out and got the kid from Ohio State that was their ace last season. And now he went out and got one of the top rated pitchers out of the portal with Zach Root, the left-hander out of East Carolina. He finished the season with a 3.56 ERA, 76 strikeouts to 21 walks through 68 and a third innings of play. He was easily one of the top guys once he entered the portal, and Dave was able to go out there and, get him to come to Arkansas. And I honestly wouldn't blame him with just looking at what Dave did this year, the elite pitching staff we had for majority of the season, what Hagen Smith's done. And I think he's excited to probably come in and develop under a guy like Matt Hobbs that, it seems like every year Arkansas at least has a decent pitching staff. And, I think with what we have coming back and just bringing in this, we have the chance to have, another great year next year from the mound.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a guy like Zach Root, you see Hagen's leaving. There's an opening right there for somebody like him. Fairly big left-handed pitcher, can come in and chew up a lot of innings. He's already shown that he can do that. Throws a lot of strikes. His strike-to-walk ratio is very good. It's not Hagen Smith level, but it's very good. So you bring in a guy like that, let him develop with Matt Hobbs, maybe tweak a few things. I mean, we saw it with Hagen just this year. Some of the minor mechanics tweaks that he did that were able to kind of propel him that much further than what he was able to do even last year. So those are the types of things that all of the analytics and technology that we have now and the good coaching that we have from Matt Hobbs and the guys, you can take a good player and turn him into a great player. And this is definitely a pitcher that has that opportunity. If you go watch some of his tape from ECU, I mean, he was a fairly dominant pitcher even there. Had a couple bad outings, but overall, pretty good pitcher there. So he's got a lot of potential to come in. The competition level at SEC is obviously going to be tough. So can he rise up to that occasion? But we're reloading. I don't know how else to say it.
I mean, that's true. I mean, it's hard to not say that, especially whenever, you went out and got a studs, transfer last year with Mason Molina, who had, like we said, a decent 3/4 of the season until him and Brady dropped off right there towards the end. And I think that's just a testament to, how much kids value the offer and, getting to play for a program like Arkansas. Another one of those guys is the guy I just mentioned a while ago, Elliott Peterson. He's a catcher from Southeast Community College, JUCO guy. He hit
Huge numbers,
517, 585, 894 last season, 15 home runs, not crazy number of home runs, 91 RBIs, 85 runs on 107 hits. And the big one here, let me remind you, he is a catcher and has 25 stolen bases, which is it's not really heard of a catcher that steals that much. And yes, it'll be a great competition to see him and Ryder Helfrich competing next year. As you know, you're probably losing Hudson White to the draft. Parker Rowland's out of eligibility. I think Hudson Polk's out of eligibility. So you're losing at least 2, maybe 3 guys. And, now he probably sees the opportunity to come in and compete for a job at a Power 5, level. And, his stats, yes, like I said, they are community college. But if anybody can help get those translate to the next level, DVH is the guy that can do it.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. The memes are already going around about, let's let Nate Thompson cut those stats in half. But and it's not necessarily fair to Nate Thompson to say that either, because like you said, this kid's coming in from JUCO. Those are absurd stats. So at least part of it's going to translate. I expect him to bat 300 plus. Maybe not 500.
Probably not 517, but
yeah, he's not going to be a Charlie Condon, I don't imagine, and bat 500 for half the year. But maybe. You never know. That said, though, you bring in somebody that's obviously got ability to run the base paths, has got ability to get significant hit totals, hit a few home runs here and there. That's a good balance, that type of approach that you saw that he had at a community college. If you can get that to come over and translate, you're doing great things. And we've got a couple of holes to fill. Even if he doesn't play catcher, you got a DH role potentially, because most likely Sousa's going to be playing at second. So he DH'd quite a bit. I can't remember if we're getting Jack Wagner back or not. Was he? I thought he was out of eligibility as well. So there's going to be a couple of guys that cycled through that DH role that either A, won't be here anymore, or are most likely going to have a starting role in a different position. So maybe you have a new DH right here. You never know.
Well, how many times, too, did we see this season that, if he wasn't starting catching, Hudson White was DHing?
Yep.
And he was
him and Ryder were kind of flip-flopping. So
you
could see the exact same thing happen between these two guys.
Yeah, you never know. And so quickly we'll run through how some of these Arkansas guys are doing in their summer leagues. The Arkansas, one of the accounts tweeted out just, earlier today, Tate McGuire, a guy that you didn't see a lot of this year, but that was expected to be a contributor hopefully this next season. Through 4 starts and 16 innings on the mound, he is tied for 5th in the league in strikeouts with 20. So he's a guy that is really having himself a summer in the, whichever, I believe it's the Cape Cod League. And, it's incredible that these guys are able to, you didn't really know what you had because we had such a big rotation for the most part last season that stayed consistent, that he didn't get a lot of playing time, but he's starting to develop a little bit more and show what he can do. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, 100%. We heard it a couple years back when Dave Van Horn was talking about Peyton Holt. That's a future starter right there. He's not a backup. That's how most of the guys that are on the bench during a lot of our games are. Even though they're technically on the bench and they're not starting, they're a future starter or have that potential to be. If you're playing at Arkansas, you've got that kind of talent, or most likely have that kind of talent somewhere in there. And it's just, can you get it to come out when the time is right, when the moments are critical in game scenarios and things like that. Obviously, you have to have good practices to show the coaches that you have that capability to want to make them put you in the game, if you will. But then when you have those opportunities in game, whether it's non-conference, midweek, conference game, whatever the case may be, you have those guys that really can rise to that occasion. And I think our roster is full of them. And a lot of them, a Reese Robinette that gets redshirted, don't even get the chance to really show that this year, potentially are going to have breakout seasons next year just out of nowhere because you didn't see them this past year. So there's a lot of talent that's on this roster that, depending on the development they have through the offseason, the development they had last year during the season, that is behind the scenes that you don't see. There's a lot of these guys that could really explode onto the scene that have that level of capability and that level of talent. It's just, can they kind of put all the pieces together at the right time?
Yeah. One of those guys that is making the most of his summer league is one Vahiva Aloy, as he is just, was named Cape Cod Player of the Week on July 8th after a stretch where he hit 409, 1.227, and 0.13 or 1636 with 6 home runs over a 5-game span, which is insane. He became the 13th player in Cape Cod League history to hit 3 home runs in a single game. We know he has that kind of power, and I think he's just taken a step forward in his development. We kind of saw him show flashes throughout the year. He is one of our more consistent hitters, but you'd see him have a good game or two, and then he'd have a 1 or 2 games where he maybe would make contact or wouldn't look super great, and it was back and forth all season. But I think he's definitely making the most out of this summer league appearance and, taking a step forward in development that he could bring back to be a big piece for Arkansas next season.
Yeah, I think he's going to be scary. He's got a season of SEC ball under his belt. You get that confidence. Honestly, his numbers would have been very good if he hadn't had the slow start to the year that he did. Even, with some of the ups and downs throughout the year, overall, he had a pretty great year, especially if you cut out the first quarter. And so I think a little bit of that's probably just, new team, new season jitters. Come back, you're comfortable with the guys, you're comfortable with the team, you're comfortable with the fans that you're playing in front of now, because that's kind of a new thing compared to what he was used to. So maybe he's able to get off to a hot start a little bit faster this upcoming season. And with what he's doing in the Cape Cod League, it just seems like he kept his momentum rolling on and is improving. The thing is about the Cape Cod League, there is other very high level talent in that league. It's not like they're going down there and playing a bunch of scrubs. There is other high level talent from other SEC schools from all over the country that they are matched up with, playing with on the same teams, the whole shebang. So the competition level didn't really drop off a lot considering what he is doing down there.
Yeah, that's true. We'll jump into some of these other guys we'll highlight on in the summer league. You have Gabe Geckel that actually participated with the USA Baseball Collegiate National Team. He had 2 appearances, 3 innings, only allowed 1 run, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts with a 0.0 ERA for the USA Baseball Collegiate National Team. You have Gage Wood down in Cape Cod, 5 appearances, 13 innings, 8 hits, 6 runs, 2 earned runs, 6 walks, 23 strikeouts with a 1.38 ERA, a 1.0 whip, and a 0.174 BAA.
Yeah, that's crazy numbers. But that was Gage Wood all year, honestly. He had a couple bad outings here and there, but especially towards the latter part of the year, he was one of our more reliable pitchers, especially against some of the better SEC teams. So I'm not surprised to hear those numbers at all. I hadn't seen that.
Yeah,
that's
and
awesome.
We talked about Tate McGuire doing good things. Ben Bybee, he's playing 4 appearances, 3 starts, 15 and 1/3 inning, 12 hits, 7 runs, 5 walks, 15 strikeouts. He has a 4.11 ERA with a 1.11 whip. We talked about Vahiva Aloy. You got Ryder Helfrich, 18 games, 69 at bats. He's drove in 18 runs, 20 hits, 3 doubles, 6 home runs, 21 RBIs, 5 walks, and struck out 13 times, and he's hitting .290 with a 354 OBP, slugging percentage of .551, and a .905 OPS.
It's not bad. It's really not bad at all.
As we keep looking at some of these Arkansas guys, you had Reese Robinette, the guy we're talking about. He's actually in the New England Collegiate League. He's played in 23 games so far, 72 at bats. He's scored 18 runs himself, 28 hits, 8 doubles, 5 home runs, 22 RBIs, 15 walks, only 16 strikeouts, hitting .389, 500 OBP, 708 slugging, and a 1.208 OPS.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, I mean, these guys are definitely taking steps up, and you love to see it. Some of the guys that Arkansas is bringing in that we'll talk about. You look at Michael Anderson, the guy we just talked about, first baseman from Rhode Island. He's played so far in Cape Cod 17 games, 63 at bats, 10 runs, 19 hits, 4 doubles, 5 home runs, 16 RBIs, 10 walks, hitting 302, 408 OBP, 603 slugging, and 1.01 OPS. You look at some other guys, what they're doing. Maximus Martin, the shortstop infielder from Georgia State, 21 games, 72 at bats, 18 runs, 4 doubles, 1 triple, 15 RBI, 16 walks, hitting 250. You'd like to see that a little bit higher. 402 OBP, 333 slugging, and 736 OPS.
There's a lot of talent spread everywhere, man. We kind of already hit on it. There's going to be guys that are playing in some of these leagues right now that aren't going to play much next year just because of the depth that we've got. And that's okay. This is how they develop, and this is how they turn into those, next man up type starters. So seeing the development from some of these kids, especially guys like Ryder Helfrich, man, that's awesome to see. So I think it sets us up nicely, having the depth that we will. It's been a good thing for us over the last 10 seasons. We always have a decent amount of depth at certain positions, at least. And seems like lately we're getting a ton of depth in the pitching department too. So it's been a nice spot to be in, that's for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And so now the big topic of the week that we're going to talk about is this Arkansas quarterback room. But before we jump into that, don't forget to check out Scarlet Letter, Arkansas's very own handcrafted seltzer. Go check them out. You can go to Core Brewing, their local place here in Northwest Arkansas, where that is made at, and you can get it on tap. They are releasing their newest vodka soda this month, but go check them out. Fantastic things they're doing there. Our lovely partner that we get to do live shows at. Can't thank them enough, but go check them out if you get a chance. And so, Arkansas quarterbacks, this is going to be a big one this year. Arkansas did lose KJ Jefferson to the transfer portal. He didn't have the season everybody expected, or even himself he probably expected. And, you had Bobby Petrino come in, and you have KJ Jefferson leave, and you're looking at your quarterback roster, and you've at that time, you have Jacoby Criswell, Malachi Singleton, and incoming KJ Jackson. That is about who you're looking at. Petrino comes in, goes and looks at and brings in a guy, Taylor Green from Boise State, a guy that he actually recruited looked at while he was at Missouri State that he really liked. Green decided to enter the portal. Petrino came calling, and he's that type of quarterback. And then you see after spring, Jacoby Criswell enters the portal. He decides to head back to North Carolina, where he initially went to out of high school. You have Arkansas bring in a guy from Coastal Carolina and Blake Boda. You have Austin Ledbetter that's coming over from baseball. And so, we all know Taylor Green's going to be your starter coming into the season here. 6'6", 223 redshirt junior. He had 12 starts at Boise last year, went 121 out of 212 for his passes, 57% completion rate. He threw for 1,752 yards, 11 touchdowns. He also had 78 carries for 436 yards and 9 touchdowns. So, yeah, that can get things done with his legs as well as his arm. We'd like to see that, completion percentage increase a little bit. And we've talked about that, but we've talked about Taylor Green. We've talked with Taylor Green. What do you think, just with Petrino and your expectations, what do you think we see out of Green this season?
Well, I think the biggest thing and some of the biggest reasons Petrino went and got him, even though, he was going to be bringing him to SEC level of competition, was that he saw even, way back in high school, the intangibles that Taylor Green has. He's 6'6". He can run well. He's very long arm, so he can really kind of throw up and over the top of even the biggest offensive lines without having to get outside the pocket. But he can get outside the pocket if need be. So very versatile quarterback, which has kind of been Bobby Petrino's bread and butter as of late. You especially think back to the guys like Lamar Jackson that he had at Louisville and some players like that. Obviously, a couple of the quarterbacks down there in A&M.
I mean, if you even think about Ryan Mallett, he
was
he
mobile
still could
enough.
move. Yeah.
Yeah, he was mobile enough to extend
But
plays.
talk about size-wise, him and Taylor are very similar, and they talk about the size and how they're built. Like you said, those intangibles.
Yep. So with those intangibles, even though the stats weren't just like eye-popping at Boise and something that you're like, oh, we got to go get this kid and bring him to the SEC. If you are Petrino as a coach, you look at that, you're like, okay, I already have a relationship with this kid. He's somebody that I thought I could have taken, and made a tremendous player out of him, even coming out of high school. He's got some collegiate experience under him now, which is not a bad thing. I can get him to come over to a bigger name school where he's going to get more exposure, potentially more NIL. I don't really know how much all that is, whatever. I know he has a Dodge truck, but outside of that, that's all their business. But I think he saw somebody that was available that he knew could be a phenomenal player if he was developed properly, because those intangibles were already there, the stuff that you can't coach up. The speed, the height, the arm length, all of those things, even the IQ. I mean, just talking to Taylor in the couple of times we've gotten to, you can tell he's a very, very sharp individual, very sharp. He's got it up top. You can just tell that by talking to him. I'm not saying some of these other guys haven't talked to all of them, but you can just tell he's got it. He's got the work ethic, just all of those things. And so taking him, Petrino being the guy he is, he understands the game better than most coaches in the country, honestly. And being able to mold him, let him develop. We might see tremendous things out of him this year. If he stays after this year, you might see even more tremendous things out of him the next year, where he's got, significant experience under his belt in Petrino's offense, in Petrino's scheming, in Petrino's playbook, those things. So I really think there was a lot of factors as to why Petrino wanted to go get somebody that was more, I don't want to say more his style, because I think Malachi Singleton, KJ Jackson have a lot of potential to be Petrino's style as well and to be phenomenal quarterbacks. But to go get somebody that has a little bit of experience and already has a little bit of understanding of Petrino. So we will see how well of a season it goes. I think there's more things riding on how well Taylor Green plays than just Taylor Green. We talked about that last year with some of KJ's struggles. They weren't all KJ's fault. Let's be honest. We made KJ have to win games on his own, it's felt like sometimes. So the offensive line has definitely got to do their job. You have to have skilled players that capitalize when the ball is thrown to them, don't have drops, can extend plays, get open when you're having to do scramble drill type scenarios. It'll be nice to have Luke Haas back. He was phenomenal at that, really great at finding that chemistry with his quarterback and showing his numbers to him on those types of plays where things break down. And then your running backs, you have to be able to pick up blitzes and make up for, mismatches on the offensive line, if you will, or just scheming. When somebody's bringing 7 or 8 guys on a blitz, you're not going to have that many guys on the line most of the time. So how well can your running backs chip block, protect your quarterback for that extra half a second, whatever it is? There is a lot of factors that are going to go into how successful Taylor Green can be, or any of these other quarterbacks if Taylor Green goes down. So, yeah, there's a long spiel right there. I've got high hopes for Taylor, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player for us. But there's going to have to be some other factors that all come together around him for him to have the success that I think he has the potential to.
I mean, that's all fair. And I think one of the things you're talking about, him coming from Boise to here, I think one thing that could help, especially if you look at it, Arkansas could have a very underrated, really good, complete wide receiver group, along with the tight ends. You return everybody from last year and you bring in some more talent. You're, like you said, you're getting Luke Haas back. You bring, you got Ty Washington back. I wouldn't be surprised to see, some 2 tight end sets. Petrino, he loves to use his tight ends as well. I think about DJ Williams, kind of Chris Gregg, those type of guys that, have been at Arkansas in the past. And another factor, we'll talk about it when we talk about that position group, offensive line. It's going to clearly have to be better than last year. And you saw Pitman go out and address that, bringing in, essentially a whole new group, except for maybe a couple guys that returned from last year, or, will be back in that rotation. But for the most part, it's a new unit. He's being more hands on it. where he said, Bobby, here's the offense. You handle this. I'm going to go, work with the offensive line and make sure that, we essentially don't have a season like last year. His reputation got called into question last year where he is a offensive line guru type coach, and everybody's like, why are we so terrible? You can't have that. And I think it's probably because he had to probably be more hands-on with the offense than he wanted to be and couldn't really focus on that. We talked about, we didn't think at the end of the day, in hindsight, that the pairing of Dan Enos was not a great fit. We talked about it before the season that we thought it might be, but maybe it would have looked better if we would have had a better offensive line. But yeah, I mean, you never know. So I think that's going to be a factor. But like you said, I think him coming in and having some SEC receivers and built that connection with some receivers that are all returning, have been here before, getting some of those tight ends back, and then hopefully an improved offensive line. I don't see why he couldn't have a stellar season.
Yeah, and another thing I'll touch on briefly, I don't want to go too far into it, but I think might have been part of a problem last year. This is speculation, but there is already good chemistry between Talon and the offensive line. You can see it in social media posts. We have seen it firsthand. Getting to interview Talon and Addison Nichols together at the same time, they're obviously very good friends already. So there's your center and quarterback combo, and then Carmona and a couple of those other guys, they all get along quite well so far and have good chemistry from the get-go. I think you started to lose some of that last year with KJ and some of the offensive linemen. You can speculate on reason why. Everybody has their own opinions and things of that nature, but there was something not clicking correctly with the communication side of things in that unit. So I think we are starting out on day one in a better position than we were last year, even though there's a lot of unknowns just from the chemistry standpoint, and that the guys obviously want to play together, want to play for each other, want to be a team, want to succeed together, want to fail together. I don't know if we had as much of that last year as we do right now. Granted, if that makes it the whole season, who knows? If we start getting our butts whooped, it may not make it very long. We might see a lot of frustrated faces out there. But at the same time, like I said, I think we start off on the right foot this year in comparison to last year by far.
I couldn't agree more. That's fair. Honestly, I couldn't blame KJ for not necessarily being too happy with the offensive line. If I'm on the ground every play, every other play, of course I'm going to be frustrated with you and, kind of wanting you to get it together. But, hopefully, like you said, it's clear that it seems like this group has a core relationship foundation built to hopefully be successful. And I think that's what we'll see. And, another guy that we'll talk about, Talon's the starter, but you've got a lot of unknown behind him as far as not a ton of experience, not, very young faces behind him in that quarterback room. Criswell transferring out took away a lot of experience, even though he didn't play a ton last year, and, from what we heard, speculation that he got beat out, but he still was a guy that had been around a little bit. But going into the season with how spring ended, it looks like your QB2, your backup quarterback to Talon is going to be Malachi Singleton. He's coming into the season at 6'1", 225, so a little bit shorter than Talon, but kind of same body build there. He's a redshirt freshman, redshirted last year. He was a guy that, 4-star came in, was expected to kind of probably battle for that QB2 spot last year. Didn't get a lot of playing time, maybe a little bit towards the end of the season there. But, he's a guy that I'm sure Petrino will want to mold and be able to work with. But he had a great spring, looked great in spring practice. He's a guy that, is a very mobile quarterback, a guy that, I think when Bryles was here, was recruiting several top guys very similar to KJ Talon that can move and has a great arm. And I think we saw that in spring practice, and that's why he really jumped up the depth chart here and is going to be your QB2 for going into this football season, and probably a big reason that Jacoby transferred out is because, he got beat out for that number 2 job. And I'm sure Criswell was hoping he could compete for that QB1 job this year. And I don't know if it was just, too much to learn a new offense and a Petrino offense yet again after you just learned a new offense the previous season. And things like that you never know. Hopefully he has the best of luck back at North Carolina, but I'll be interested to see, what kind of development we see out of Singleton this year. Does he get much playing time? Do we have some games where it feels weird seeing it where we could be up and then he gets some maybe garbage time minutes to, get some action on the field? No, but, if he was able to jump up the spring depth chart, kind of beat out an experienced guy like Criswell, maybe there's a high ceiling there for Malachi Singleton.
Yeah, I think that's 100% the right take. That's what everybody's been talking about. That's the I don't want to say like rumor, but that he was not necessarily supposed to be the number 2 guy coming into the year, but the work he put in and the development that he put in really skyrocketed him up to right behind. I mean, honestly, he's probably competing with Taylor Green for the number 1 spot. And that's what you want to see. I think it's Taylor Green's to lose, obviously, but to have a couple of guys behind Taylor Green that you're not downgrading a whole lot if you do have to play them. I think there is going to be some just from an experience factor. But you think back to a couple years ago when we had KJ and the mobile quarterback that was behind him didn't want to play wide receiver. Can't think of his name now. Dang it.
Yeah.
Super fast kid. Crap. It felt like a significant drop off anytime KJ had to come out of the game. And that's what you don't want to have happen. So having a guy like Malachi Singleton show that improvement to jump Criswell, obviously Taylor, kind of came in. I think he was expected to be the number 1 guy over Criswell transferring over. There was probably some communication as to that, as to why we were able to get him to commit. But that competition was still there with Jacoby not transferring out until after, spring ball. So I think that is a true testament to Malachi Singleton's work ethic and his talent level. And to your point, the ceiling that he has. Give Taylor Green a couple of years. If we're able to keep Singleton around until he's a junior, give him a year or two. At that point, maybe he's just a phenomenal player by then. You never know. That's kind of old school style football, pre-NIL, pre-transfer portal and stuff, to be able to keep somebody for a few years and have them come in as a junior/senior. That's what you used to see all the time at, the powerhouse schools, but it's not really the same way this day and age. So we'll see what kind of shakes out there. That's really one of the biggest curiosities for me is some of these guys that are all kind of in that same year mark that are redshirt freshmen or true freshmen, kind of in that same category. Taylor's going to be your guy this year, has potential to be your guy next year as well. Are you able to keep Malachi Singleton that long? Who knows? So I don't know. It's a fun game to play, some of these what ifs. But at the same time, you've got to have a QB2, you got to have a QB3, and I think we've got a couple decent guys there for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's just you got to bring those guys in. You can be like a Kentucky team that does rely on transfer quarterbacks for the most part, but you'd love to see some guys that you can have that would have development. And I mean, you never know. And the guy you're thinking of, Malik Hornsby,
Hornsby.
He was highly rated very fast, but you saw him get out on the field. He had an opportunity that in 21, 22, where KJ was out. He got the start against LSU, and we could have won that game. It was a very low-scoring game, snow game in Arkansas. And he got the start and just
looked terrible.
Looked like he was out on skates out there. Didn't seem like there's any development there, or that he picked up the offense because he was a second-year guy. Had been here a little bit and just didn't really pick it up. But hopefully, I think we're seeing a different side of that with Malachi Singleton, a guy that come in and has really worked, like you said, put in that work, put in that effort, and has really studied the playbook and picked up and impressed Petrino enough to, be in that QB2 spot. Another guy that I think has impressed Petrino that I would say is probably your QB3 that could be competing for the job next year if Green leaves, or even the backup next year, is KJ Jackson. He just came in this year as a freshman, but yes, we have another KJ coming in at quarterback. He's 6'4", 223, is a 4-star quarterback coming in from Alabama. And, he's a guy that Petrino really liked. In one of his intro press conferences, they're asking about kind of the guys on the roster and some of the quarterbacks he has. And he was talking about KJ Jackson. He said, he's really fast, got a rocket of an arm on him. And I think it's one of those things everybody we've talked to said Petrino has a complicated offense. And if you can go in there and really figure that out, I think that's going to be what can set you apart is if you can learn his offense and then be able to go out on the field and take what you learn and put it into action. And, there's a lot of hype around KJ Jackson as well. I mean, his recruiting was very interesting. And to see him decide to come to Arkansas and keep that commitment through the loss of Bryles, through the bad season we had last year, and to get him on campus this year, I think that's pretty good. And, you have him, a guy that all these guys, for the most part, him maybe a little bit more than Malachi, very similar in size to Talon and KJ, 6'4", 6'6", guys that are big body but can still move, maybe a little bit more speedier than KJ was as far as KJ Jefferson. That's not going to get confusing at all. But KJ Jefferson was one of those guys that you saw him just run people over. I think Talon and this KJ Jackson are going to be guys that don't necessarily try to run guys over, but are going to try to beat you with their speed or, outmaneuver you kind of agility wise and not just pure strength. I'm going to run you over. And, we love to see that from Jefferson, but I think with Talon Green, we could see some explosive plays from him, especially as very similar traits to Lamar Jackson as he has, and he's built that way. If Petrino can mold him that way, I think we could see, the potential for him have a lot of yards on the ground as well as in the air. And hopefully I think we'll see more of it than we did last year, making more reads instead of looking, one read, then I'm going to tuck and run. Do your progressions across the field, find those your second, third receiver, even your check down, or like even a guy like Luke Haas, like we talked about, that has built that rapport. And, before he got hurt, seemed to be a very good insurance blanket for KJ last year, a guy that you can dump off and count on to catch it. I think that, all these guys that we've talked about so far, we don't know much about KJ Jackson other than, he was really highly talented, had great stats and stuff in high school. Got some praise in spring practice, but it'll be interesting to see how he develops after a full season, kind of just being with the system, being on the sideline, learning from guys like Talon, Malachi, and Petrino. He's can develop some quarterbacks if, you look back at his resume. And so I think he's an exciting guy to think about down the road, maybe 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, he's another one of those ones, similar to Malachi. Are you able to keep him long enough to get him significant playing time to see how they've developed? You know what I'm saying? So we've got 3 guys that do have similar traits, similar intangibles, if you will. Guys that are touted to have rockets for arms, but have good legs as well. They're not just, towers back there. They can play from the pocket. That's one thing that they need to be able to do. And I think that's one thing that Petrino is going to ask of all of them, but then at the same time, be able to extend plays here and there. That's what all the good quarterbacks are able to do nowadays, whether it's in the pros or at the collegiate level. You have to be able to throw from the pocket, but then you have to have good enough legs to extend plays. And if you have good enough legs to be able to run run some QB draws and things of that nature, and naked bootlegs would be able to take off, kind of that RPO style. You're seeing that more and more at the pro level as well with guys like Kyler Murray, obviously Lamar, Josh Allen, guys like that, bigger body quarterbacks that have good mobile legs and things of that nature. And so we just named off 3 that have those types of intangibles. The biggest question mark, obviously, is can you fine tune the small things to make them efficient at the SEC level? Bring those pass completion rates up, not have drop balls due to inaccurate throws. If it's drop balls due to receivers, that's one thing. But if it's drop balls because you overthrew a guy by a half a foot, yeah, they should have still caught it, but it was a very difficult play instead of an easy play. You saw that off and on last year with KJ, which was kind of frustrating at times, where you'd have somebody wide open and they'd be overthrown to the point that they either A, couldn't catch it, or they couldn't catch it and continue running. They'd have to make a diving play, and then now you're down at the 30 instead of an easy touchdown. So those are the types of plays. Football's a game of inches. It really is. So those types of plays, we had several where should have been touchdown type scenarios, ended up resulting in field goals only, or even punts. So being able to have those fine-tuned developments, improvements throughout their careers, those are what takes you from a good quarterback to a great quarterback, which we've had in the past. And you've seen that in the past where our quarterbacks didn't miss on those throws, and those were touchdowns every time, or very close. And that's what we've got to get to. That's what you see out of the best teams. It is. I mean, it just truly is guys that don't miss on the big plays and then don't make mistakes on the small, mundane plays either. Those little flag routes, the quick slants, obviously the bubble screens. You can't miss on those either because then you're behind the chains. So you have to be good at it all, which is a tough ask, obviously. But taking those intangibles as far as a quarterback that can put you in the right position to be able to make the throw and then develop them and their accuracy and their skills to where they make that throw every time. That's what Petrino is good at. And so I'm excited to see a couple of these types of players that have that level of potential. It just, you're able to do a lot with it from an offensive standpoint compared to, you think back to some previous quarterbacks we had. Cole Kelly, for example, huge guy, real tall, had a great arm, but couldn't get out the pocket hardly and resulted in a lot of sacks.
The old steamboat package.
Old steamboat. I mean, and yeah, when you're 4th and 1, he was great, but anything outside of that, you couldn't get much extension out of play. So if the offensive line broke down, it was just a disaster pretty much every time. So having some guys with more flexibility, that's what you need. That's the way the college game has gone. That's even the way the pro game has gone. So I think these 3 guys that we just named are definitely your 1, 2, 3 for those reasons alone. And then if you're able to, take that diamond in the rough and really polish it, that's where players can really blossom and turn into the next Lamar Jackson, for example.
Yeah, that could be the very possibility. A couple of other guys we're going to talk about that. Austin Ledbetter, we talked to him here on the show. He's going over, could be a depth piece for this team. It's clear going into the season, Taylon Green is your guy. You also got Blake Boda that transferred over from Coastal Carolina, played in some games last year, but still maintained that red shirt. He's 6'4", 200, a guy that Petrino had recruited at some point, whether it was when he was at Missouri State, most likely, or, maybe at A&M, but another guy that, if he sees something in, he's going to recruit a guy. And, I think like you said, though, you've got your 1, 2, and 3 with Taylor Malachi and KJ Jackson. I mean, there's a lot to be optimistic about this season, and I think it's going to be, I mean, if we're being frank, and I said it on, I was on the SEC College Huddle where we talked about and went through and talked about coaches, and no one's trying to shy away from the fact that Pitman's on the hot seat this year. I mean, after the expectations for last year, and you just have an abysmal year where stuff went downhill really fast, really early, and yet you had 5 games that were a 1-score game in some capacity, whether that was a field goal or a touchdown. I mean, the fact that we were that bad last year, but we're still with that close to 2-3 more wins.
Defense kept us in a lot of games. You think about that Mississippi State game, man. I mean, you can't score 1 touchdown or you win because the defense played that well. But sorry,
yeah, no. I mean, that's true. I mean, and hopefully we continue to see that development out of the defensive side of the ball with Travis Williams. He's done fantastic things with that defense. Like we said, that question mark we do have is in that linebacker room. That's going to be a very young core group of kids, but if anything, the talent's there. We saw some of those guys get some playing time last year that did stay, and it would, is going to hopefully seize the opportunity. But at the end of the day, bringing Petrino back, I think was a interesting decision. I think it was maybe, I hate to say it this way, but like a last second heave, if you will, I've got to do something, let's see what we can do. And, maybe I keep my job if we have a successful season and we have a decent offense this year. The Razorback fans are split 50-50, whether they're like, all right, let's, see if Pitman can turn this back around, or, can he, or let's move on. Let's find the next guy. I mean, you're always going to have that between fan bases, but if he can succeed, and that's the whole point of being a head coach, is you see a lot that have some type of specialty, but also being able to hire where your weaknesses are. And if that means Pitman stays, has a successful year, and turns things around, and he has to just be like, okay, my offensive coordinator is 100% on the offense other than the offensive line. My defensive coordinator is going to be handle the defense. I'm going to kind of handle the higher up kind of, not as in-depth pieces for both those sides of the ball, but count on my coordinators to do their jobs. But then I'm going to focus on what I'm a quote unquote guru in, and that was the offensive line. And I think that's what you see in some of these successful head coaches is they have a position group or spot like offense, defense that they're good at, but then they know to hire where they're weak at. And, maybe that is like even leaving some of those late game calls up to a guy like Petrino that's been a head coach before. And like, we saw some of those question marks last year where Pitman was like, well, I didn't really know what to do in this spot. You think about a field goal. I think it was that Mississippi State game that, he almost kicked the field goal, but then you have a delay of game because he's like, I wasn't sure what to do. And,
it was like worst case scenario.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you let a guy that's been there, done that, or is very experienced with offense handle that. And if you struggle with that, I'm sure Petrino knows what he's doing. He's been the head coach in that position before. So if he just has that opportunity on the offense, I mean, everybody's going to make a wrong decision from time to time. But for the most part, I think it's safe to say you can trust Petrino with offense and, what he's doing.
100%. I think that is going to be big, is how well Pitman is able to kind of share the load and delegate responsibilities in game. That's a great point, about those in-game decisions. Obviously, Sam can make a lot of them, and I think he does well in some of them that he doesn't get enough credit for, because there's the overshadowing ones where he didn't make the right decision or didn't make a decision at all or something, and so those ones are the big ones that everybody remembers. But having a little bit of help out there, I think when he had Coach Odom with him, I think Coach Odom helped in those in-game decisions quite often as well, and so having another head coach come in, or previous head coach, if you will, come in, maybe kind of patches that back up and get you back to that sharing the load type of scenario. But then I think one of the big things that you hit on is obviously focus on the thing he's best at, which is offensive line. Really put your heart and soul into that. And then the rest of the head coach responsibility, in my mind, is getting the team ready mentally. And I think Sam does better at that than a lot of people give him credit for. Getting the guys motivated, getting the guys' headspace in the right position, and then keeping them accountable. And here's the thing, developing them into good people and good men, as well as good football players. I think Sam does better than that. They're better at that than a lot of people give him credit for, and better than a lot of the other SEC coaches out there. Getting these guys game ready mentally. You would see it even with some of our struggles last year. You think back to Chad Morris, when we'd get down by 10, 12 points, boy, it was over. And you could tell every player on the team's face was down. Everybody was disheartened. You didn't really see that, maybe out of KJ at a time or two, but just because he was getting rocked back there behind the line. But outside of that, most of those guys were really playing hard every down, late in the games. You could tell the motivation was still there. You could tell that the coaching level was still there as far as that motivation factor. And most of that is driven from Sam on down. And so you do have to give him his credit when it comes to that alone, what he's able to do as far as preparing a team mentally and motivationally for games. He does better at that than it shows. I don't know if that's really the right term. I don't know, but I think he does a great job at relating to players, understanding them, understanding what makes them tick, even though he's significantly older and all that. But I think he does a great job of relating to the players and getting them mentally ready for games. And that is one of the main head coach responsibilities in my mind. So he does a good job there. And like you said, hiring where you don't do a good job, go get a Petrino, for example. Maybe that kind of bridges the gap that we had this past season and rights the ship just on the coaching side of things, if you will. Obviously, the players, they have a lot to do with winning football games, but coaching has a lot to do with winning football games too. So I'm rooting for Pitman hard. I don't want him to go. I know a lot of fans are already ready to have him go, and a lot of fans don't expect him to make it out of the season even. And there's depending on how the season goes, they might be correct in that it might be time. But I'm rooting for him big time. Want to have a bounce back year for him to be able to keep his job, and then get us to kind of climb back to those 8-4, 9-4 type years that we had his first few years. So.
Yeah, that's true. And plus, another underrated thing, you got to consider Pitman is a great recruiter as well. I mean,
That's
he
also
recruits
true.
well. I mean, it may not show because like you compare Arkansas comparative to like the rest of the SEC. Yes, you have a tough time keeping up, but he's been able to land some guys and recruit. Like you think about when he was at Georgia and like all the guys in the NFL that he's coached as far as offensive lineman, he's able to recruit his position well.
Think
And
back
so,
of when he was Arkansas, back
yeah,
his
think about
original
before
stint.
he left and
That
went to
offensive line
Georgia.
was wild.
Yeah, I mean, so you got to think about that. And I mean, we'll get ready to wrap up here. If anybody has some questions, you chime in thoughts that you want to shoot on the comments here. We'll answer any questions you have, or want to share what you're thinking about the position grouping, the football season, whatever it may be. I mean, like we said, we're optimistic, and you kind of try to be, but it's going to be an interesting
A lot of
season.
questions.
Yeah, and I think part of it's going to be those first 5 games are going to be extremely crucial. I mean, you've got to start out. You want us to go into the A&M game at least 500 or preferably better. There was an anonymous SEC coach in an article that said that he would be surprised if Pitman made it to Halloween. And I mean, if the season goes bad at the beginning, you think you got UAPB week 1 in Little Rock. That should, I emphasis, should be a win. You go to week 2, Oklahoma State on the road. That's going to be a tough matchup on the road. They've got a lot of, experience coming back. That offensive line's back. Ollie Gordon and Alan
He's
Bowman.
going to play apparently.
Yeah, his punishment is he's going to play. How man, that's a hard punishment. I would hate to have to play as my punishment. That's a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to get into. But if you could squeak out a win there, that would be a big win against another Power 5 program early in the season, kind of like how BYU should have been last year. And then you come back and you get UAB at home. That should be a win. Should. You got Auburn on the road. One of your more easier SEC games. It is on the road, but you've got an Auburn program that's rebuilding. If you get a win there, you're potentially sitting at 2 or 3-1, maybe 4-0. And then you go to A&M, that new head coach. You never know. They lost a lot to the portal. There's probably going to be a tough defensive game because that's what Elko does. You look at that. That could go 50-50. I mean, looking at the worst scenario, you could be 2 and after A&M, you could be 2-3. Or you could be
1-4. UAB's not a sleeper.
That is true.
Or not a cakewalk. They're kind of a sleeper game.
If you're looking at that, I mean, the schedule doesn't get any easier. That's the problem, is you want to get as many as wins early because you come home from A&M, you got Tennessee. There's high expectations over there. You got a young quarterback that's talented in Nico replacing Milton. Heupel's got a program building over there. You have LSU coming to town. Brian Kelly. You know what LSU does.
They're going to be good.
They're going to be good. So those are 2 tough home games. You got Mississippi State on the road. You're probably second opportunity to win an SEC game, as they're under a first-year head coach, Jeff Lebby, that came over from Oklahoma. But then you got Ole Miss coming to town, who are expected to be in one of those expanded playoff spots. You've got Texas coming to town.
It's going to be tough.
Everybody knows that they're probably the second best team in the SEC, if not the country, behind Georgia. You got Louisiana Tech coming to town. Not a sleeper. Has some good years. Should be a win there. You go to Missouri. You don't really know how they're going to be. I'm not confident that they'll have a repeat of last year until they prove to me that they can do it. They've got Brady Cook returning. They got Luther Burden back. But can they put together that type of year that they had last year again? So, I mean, you have the potential to going into Tennessee. I could see us being 4-1. The Oklahoma game is, I don't know how to feel about that one. It's early in the season.
It's so early in the year. It's kind of a toss up. Who gets hot early? Which team the offense is rolling early? Which team's defense is not making mental mistakes and lining up incorrectly and missing assignments the least? That's going to be the biggest factor there. Not necessarily who has the most experience and who makes the biggest plays here and there and all that kind of stuff. I think it's really going to come down to a lot of those like defensive fundamentals on mistakes made, eliminating mistakes on special teams and things of that nature, with it being that early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like it's early in the year, so teams are still trying to figure out themselves. So, can Arkansas, you have UAPB to kind of get your rhythm down, kind of knock off some of that rust and, get back to football. And then you go to week 2 and it is on the road. So it's going to be a tough environment between two technically power 4 schools now. So, I mean,
it's wild.
It's like you said, a coin toss. And then, if you can, I feel comfortable if you're sitting at 4-1 by A&M, and that means you've probably figured out some things. You have a decent offense where you can score some points. I wouldn't rule out a win over Florida or Tennessee. I mean, you don't know.
It's possible.
LSU seems a little bit more tricky, but we always play them good. Doesn't matter how bad we suck, we always play them good. You look at last year, we lost to them by a touchdown.
Yep.
Mississippi State, you could be rolling by then, get a win there. I mean, the season has the potential to be that 6-7 win season we were talking about, but it also has the potential to be
2 or 3.
2-3.
Yeah, it's going to be a make or break year is not the right word, but a coin toss year definitely feels like the right word.
I mean, for Pitman, it could be a make or break year.
Well, for Pitman, it could be. Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, that's fair. But I'm saying like you're not going into this year kind of how I was thinking last year, where like we're winning 8 games. I was sure we were going to win 8 games last year with what we had returning, what I thought the year was going to go like, the schedule that we had,
the preseason hype and everything.
Yeah, it just felt like 8 games was just like the minimum, and it felt like if we didn't win 8 games, then that was a bust. And boy, it was a bust. But this year, to me, it's not like, oh, we got to win 8 games or we're going to win 8 games. I'm like thinking we might win 5. And if we win 5, we're doing decent, because that's winning your 4 non-conference and then either Mississippi State or Tennessee or Ole Miss or something like that. I don't know. It seems like Ole Miss can either be phenomenally, kind of similar to Missouri last year. They could be phenomenally good or like as bad as we are. And who knows? Who knows? We've beaten them in years where we probably shouldn't have. So maybe that happens again. I don't know. And
it's like in a year that you don't have to play in Alabama or Georgia, you still have a tough SEC schedule.
Well,
like
Texas
it's not as tough
really
as it could
solid.
be.
Yeah.
But
I don't know, man. It's just I would feel a lot more confident if this was year 2 with Taylor and Petrino and everybody, and we already kind of knew what we had, but we don't. And so that's why there's such big question marks on, like, I mean, if you play the what if game, we might come out firing on all cylinders and win 3 or 4 in a row off the rip, go into the A&M game undefeated. If you win that one, you're 5-0 and the world's on fire. And that really could happen. Like, legitimately, that could happen. I feel like this team has the talent, has made some corrections in some areas that is possible. At the same time, if it doesn't all come together on the field, we could be 0-5 at that point. I say that. There's no way we're losing to UAPB. Sorry, there's no way. We could definitely lose to UAPB. So at that point, you could be shut up. You could be 1-4 after the A&M game very easily. And at that point, the world's on fire then too, in the opposite way. But I don't know. I will say this. I think there is some – I think you let Pitman get to the Mississippi State game, no matter really what happens, as long as you win against UAPB and UAB. If you lose against Oklahoma State, whatever, they're a really good team with a ton of returners. You probably aren't going to be the favorite in that game by any stretch at all, or any of the games to that point. And then the next stretch of SEC games is pretty tough too. If you can keep it close with Tennessee, close with LSU,
Just don't get completely blown out.
Don't get blown out. Look competitive. Don't pull Chad Morris games where you're getting beat 45-14 to Western Carolina or Western Kentucky, whatever. Don't have those scenarios. And then if you can win against Mississippi State and keep on being competitive, even if you're only like 3 or 4 or 5 wins at the end of the year, maybe Pitman buys enough time. If you lose again to Mississippi State, going into it with only maybe 2 wins at that point as well, I see that's the scenario where everybody's saying he's not making it out of the year. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's what.
Welcome to being a Razorback fan. We'll see.
I was about to say, you got to play the game at the end of the day. But we'll get ready to get out of here. We'll be back next week with another preview. We'll work on figuring out which position grouping we're going to go with. We may put out another poll, so be on the watch out for that. We may go defense and alternate it. We'll see. We'll take the considerations that we've gotten in the rooms that have been the most question marks, and we will be back with you guys. But thank you again for tuning in to Hogs on the Hill, your go-to podcast for Arkansas Razorback sports updates. We are on YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube, or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. And we'll get out of here, and we'll catch you next week as we are back with our next position grouping breakdown.